My job is to encourage governments to respect human rights while countering terrorism. And I think one of the striking features of the last 14 months is how Israel has used counterterrorism rhetoric to justify exceptional, extreme violence against Palestinians, accompanied by a chronic dehumanization of the Palestinian people, which of course allows them to be killed in large numbers at the political level and also through the legal measures that Israel has taken. The international community, through international law, the General Assembly, Security Council have on many occasions repeated and insisted that all countries must respect human rights and humanitarian law when countering terrorism, without exception. That's because human rights and humanitarian law already accommodate security concerns. It's a balance between protecting people and allowing militaries to fight. So you don't need to go outside that legal framework in order to effectively and successfully deal with an adversary in an armed conflict. The problem here, of course, is that Israel, as our colleagues have already said, has enjoyed impunity for many, many decades, which has emboldened it to become increasingly violent and increasingly lawless. And this last campaign in Gaza is unprecedented in the history of warfare in recent years. It's not just that there have been extreme violations which have been well documented. So we all, over the past 14 months, have seen deliberate attacks on civilians, indiscriminate attacks, disproportionate attacks, starvation, denial of humanitarian relief, suppression of NGOs and UNRWA as terrorists, a complete lack of credible accountability through the Israeli military and civilian justice system. That's all pretty obvious and on the record. What I find more shocking in a way is that I've been working on humanitarian law for 25 years. I've cooperated technically with the Israeli Defense Forces on many occasions in the past, and I know they have excellent lawyers. Very, very good international humanitarian lawyers. So when they unleash a campaign of violence like this, they know what they're doing. And part of this story, which I don't think has been explored quite so much, is just how Israel has enabled this violence by taking very extreme, exceptional interpretations of international humanitarian law to impose a kind of cloak of legality on what they're doing. So they've expanded the definition of what is a military objective. They've expanded the category of people they call fighters who can be attacked. They impose very large numbers on the civilian casualty counts that they tolerate in targeting. They've used artificial intelligence to bypass the usual precautions that must be taken before launching attacks. They've loosened the rules on authorizing detention of militants, removing effective judicial control or access to lawyers for very protracted periods. They've authorized controls on the distribution of humanitarian relief, ostensibly on security grounds, which are not tolerated by a proper interpretation of humanitarian law. Likewise, authorizing displacement of civilians in a manner which is outside the mainstream. And this is part of a historical pattern. I mean, it's the same story if you go back on the way Israel has sought to legalize its settlements in the West Bank, housing, evictions, exploitation of Palestinian natural resources, claims to territory, etc. And the problem, of course, is, as we've all mentioned, much of this has gone unchallenged by the states that matter and that can have a real influence to change Israel's behavior on the ground. To wind up, I just mentioned that this is something which is expanding a kind of contagion that's going well beyond the occupied Palestinian territories. And in the past year, many of us have commented publicly on the kind of lawlessness that Israel has also been unleashing on its neighbors. So if you think just in recent days in Syria, destruction of the Syrian air force when there are no pilots because Syria has no functioning government or military that can fly those planes at the moment. The attacks on the buffer zone in the Syrian Golan Heights. We've seen in Lebanon indiscriminate attacks through the pager explosions, attacks on Hezbollah banks, calling them military objectives when they're just financial institutions. And again, it goes back to their exploitation of interpretations of humanitarian law. In Iran, attacks on multiple occasions, which are not in self-defense according to international law. So, of course, all of this is enormously destructive of the international legal order. If lawlessness on this scale and of this extremity has no consequences, then it sends a signal to everybody else that you can behave in the same way, and the whole system begins to break down. It's encouraging that a bunch of countries have sought to hold Israel to account, and there's a very strong legal movement on many, many fronts. But ultimately, you need the states that matter to bring the pressure to bear on Israel. Germany and the United States supply 99% of the weapons exported to Israel. They could stop this conflict overnight if they stopped the weapons that kill the Palestinians. Thank you.